This is the Untold Italy travel podcast, and you are listening to episode number 157.
Ciao a tutti and benvenuti to Untold Italy, the travel podcast where you go to the towns and villages, mountains and lakes, hills and coastlines of Bella Italia. Each week your host, Katy Clarke, takes you on a journey in search of magical landscapes, history, culture, wine, gelato, and of course, a whole lot of pasta. If you're dreaming of Italy and planning future adventures there, you've come to the right place.
Ciao, Italy travel lovers. I hope you're doing well and the excitement is building for Italian trips in your not too distant future. Now, I was going through our show episodes recently and I was a little bit shocked that I hadn't recorded an episode on this topic, to be honest. No doubt I mentioned gelato a lot on this show, but given how much I love this Italian treat, I do think it deserves its very own episode, don't you think? So, ta-da! Today what we're talking about is all things gelato. I'm going to fill you in on why it's so delicious, why it is a very, very different treat to ice cream, and where you're going to find the good stuff. Plus the flavours you should definitely try when you're in Italy because you probably won't find them at home. So are you ready? Andiamo, the gelato is waiting. First up, let's give you a quick rundown on what gelato is and isn't. Gelato is the Italian word for ice cream, and it comes from the Latin word gelatus, meaning frozen. In fact, almost 2,000 years ago, Emperor Nero would send his minions up into the mountains to get ice that was then mixed with fruit juices. Surely the precursor to gelato, so those ancient Romans were at it again, setting trends that continue for centuries. Now, there are various stories about the creation of modern gelato, but most seem to agree that it appeared at the Medici court in Florence, and it was such a big hit that Catherine de' Medici, future Queen of France and one of my favourite historical figures ever, took the recipe with her to Paris. Well, since then, over the years, the recipe for gelato was perfected, and it's now made with a combination of milk, cream, sugar, and ingredients like fresh fruit and nut purees. Sounds a bit like ice cream? Well, yes, but it's the ratio of milk and cream and the method of mixing that makes all the difference. You see, gelato uses less cream and more milk than ice cream and typically contains 4 to 8% fat compared with the 14 to 16% fat found in ice cream. Gelato is slowly churned and therefore has less air in it than ice cream, and this makes for more dense and rich flavours. It's also served at a higher temperature, which can make it a bit melty on a hot summer's day, but this also means the flavours are even more intense. This is the recipe for your classic milk-based gelato, but of course in Italy you'll also find sorbetti or sorbets, fruit-based gelato with no milk. And in Sicily you can try granita, which is more like shaved ice with syrups on top. And yes, they are all 100% delicious. Well, most of them are. Just like anything really, you can find good or great gelato and pretty average or bad gelato. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to know which is which. Firstly, usually I do a bit of research before I go to a new place and do a search for gelato artisanale or artisan gelato in that place. Artisan gelato is generally handmade in smaller batches, so there's more attention to quality and therefore flavour. There are no official credentials around this term that I'm aware of, however, so it's best used as a first pass because some shops have realised that people are looking for that label, and it can be a bit of a marketing ploy, unfortunately. So the next thing to do is check out how the gelato is stored. As you now know, gelato is served at a higher temperature than ice cream. If it is piled high inside a display cabinet, it is not great gelato because the good stuff simply could not hold that altitude. Instead, look for gelato in low tubs, sometimes covered with a metal lid, and then you'll know you're getting a really perfectly made gelato. Now, another good idea is to take a look at the colour of the gelato. When you see very bright colours, including greens, blues and pinks, run a mile. These hues can only be achieved with artificial colours and chemicals, which is not really in the spirit of gelato making. Most gelato experts will assess the colour of the pistachio flavour, which should be a muted sage green. Anything brighter and there is something else going on that's not quite natural. Which brings us to, which gelato flavours should you try? This is probably my favourite topic, I think. Of course, you're going to find all the classic flavours like chocolate, strawberry and vanilla, but I think when you're in Italy, you should really branch out and try something local. After all, the best Italian gelateria source the absolutely best and freshest local ingredients so their gelato has maximum flavour. The purest gelato flavour you can try is called fior di latte, which translates as flower of milk. Some say this is the flavour that marks a truly great gelateria, and that's because, in the absence of all other flavourings, the essence and the quality of the milk used in the gelato is absolutely critical. Fior di latte is simply milk, cream and sugar churned to perfection. It looks like vanilla, but there is no vanilla flavouring, simply milky deliciousness. It's refreshingly simple and perfect just the way it is, but if you must add something to your fior di latte gelato, make it a drizzle of traditional balsamic vinegar of Modena. I had this in a small town called Spilamberto, where balsamic vinegar is almost a religion, and it was absolutely incredible. Other creamy gelato flavours to try include crema, which is made with eggs and tastes like egg custard, stracciatella, which is sort of like choc chip, but the chocolate is in thin strips through the gelato instead of chips. I love that one. Zabaglione is a bit like crema, but has a good slug of Marsala wine for extra oomph. Speaking of chocolate, you can get milk chocolate or super dark chocolate fondente and chocolate with hazelnuts, known as bacio or kiss. Coffee is another delicious creamy flavour to try, and to round out the creams, try amarena, which is fior di latte with swirls of sour cherry. This one is actually my kids' favourite. They love it and would seek it out everywhere they go, but again, this one is a specialty of the Emilia-Romagna region, and that's where you're going to find the most delicious versions. Fruit gelatos are also great to try, and you can try them as gelato or sorbetto. So you can have them, with milk or without milk. Now you can try lemon, strawberry, raspberry, pear and fig. And these are best tried when the fruits are in season because, as you now know, everything about the gelato is about the freshness of the ingredients to extract the maximum best flavour. You'll also see more exotic flavours like mango and banana, but as these aren't grown in Italy, I usually give them a miss. Instead, you can try herb-based flavours like basil. I had a brilliant one in Benazza in the Cinque Terre last summer, or gelsi, which is a local mulberry from Sicily. In Calabria, you can also try the bergamot flavour, derived from the local citrus fruit of the same name. Now, I mentioned this flavour before, and it really is a classic, but you do need to try pistachio gelato. There is something about this delicious nut that pairs so well with the milky gelato base. Even better when there is a hint of salt to bring out the flavour. The very best pistachios come from a town called Bronte on the slopes of Mount Etna, Sicily's smoking volcano. Shout out to our friends at Enoteca Saleno who told me that the nuts in Bronte are harvested by hand by a very small number of producers, and the nuts take on the amazing properties of the volcanic soil. So look for the Bronte pistachio gelati if you want to try the ultimate version. Nuts are a very popular way to flavour gelato, except peanuts. Italians aren't really into those in a big way. So apart from pistachio, you can try nocciola, which is hazelnuts, and noce, walnuts. And they're often combined with chocolate or honey in the case of walnuts. In Sicily, where almonds are abundant, it's also a very popular flavour of granita. Well, that is a lot of flavours, and frankly, it's just scratching the surface. There is really a lot of creativity going on with gelato making these days in terms of combinations of flavours. I say go for it, especially if it's a seasonal flavour based on what's available at the markets. I will say though, my adventures in gelato tasting did not go so well when I tried the traditional cipolla onion flavour in one small town in Tuscany. It wasn't that nice, to be honest. No worries though, you can't win them all, and I'll continue to try the interesting flavours. Except probably puffo, which is the Italian word for smurf. Yes, it is bright blue, and I can't even imagine how horrible it tastes. I wouldn't even let my kids order it. Sorry, kids, but I know you love pistachio more. One of the best things to love about gelato is that it's open to almost every dietary restriction. If you're celiac or avoiding gluten, skip the cone and get a cup. If you're lactose intolerant, go for the fruit-based flavours. Gelato is for everyone, and that's why you should eat at least one, probably two a day when you're in Italy. Now, before you get too excited about your 2-a-day gelato habit, there is a bit of gelato etiquette to know before you go. And this one is especially for you first-timers and those who maybe haven't been to Italy for a while, so you don't get caught out doing the wrong thing. You'll figure it out anyway, but I just thought I'd help you along. Firstly, when you get to the counter, you are often asked to select whether you want a cone or cup and the size, how many scoops or flavours you want up front. You pay for your gelato and then move on to the next server, who you give your receipt to and then tell them the specific flavours you want. This is typical of very busy places, and it's actually pretty efficient because, as you know, sometimes people take a long time choosing their flavours. Which brings us to the next question. Can you ask to try the flavours? Yes, you can. But please read the room. No one appreciates people asking for multiple tastes when the waiting line is out the door, not the server or the other customers. If the store is empty, try asking which flavours they recommend, especially in combination. They'll love to chat with you about it, but like I said, if they are super busy, it's not the moment for it. As for the cost, you're looking at between €2 to €3 per scoop these days, and it's an absolute bargain for one of the most delicious tastes you're going to have all year. Now, I bet you're wondering which gelato shops are my favourite, and I will put a list into the show notes because it could go on for a while. But all I will say is don't always go for the fancy branding and slick design. On a recent food tour in Rome, we visited a family-run gelateria opposite Torre Lago, Argentina, which was absolutely magnificent. Sorry, everyone, they do not have a website. Now, I would have avoided it due to the large, fluorescent, massive gelato sign out the front, but this no-frills place was family-run too, offered excellent scoops, and I'm still thinking about that actually. You'll also find that in small towns they do excellent gelato because they basically cater for a much smaller crowd and can pay more attention to making their flavours as delicious as possible. I've also added a couple of larger chain stores onto our list of favourite gelato places, and these include Venchi and Grom because they do good gelato and can be relied on if you need that gelato fix and can't find a smaller one nearby that you really wanted to try. I have to admit, I love the Venchi store in Rome Airport and have often grabbed a final scoop before getting on my plane home. Now, if you're feeling inspired and are an absolute gelato fiend like me, then why not visit the Gelato Museum near Bologna? You can even make some gelato there and taste your creations. But you do need to book super early. I tried last year about 3 months in advance, but we missed out, so we'll go in for round 2 this year. However, if you're not headed to Bologna but have some spare time in Florence, our friends at Live Tours have an amazing gelato making experience at Bondi, a world-renowned gelateria in the city. Don't forget you can get 5% off this and all Live Tours experiences with code Untold Italy. Another thing to keep an eye out for are gelato festivals that happen throughout the year. As usual, the websites unfortunately are not awesome, but we were lucky enough to book a trip a few years ago that coincided with the Gelato World Masters Final in Florence, and I've got to say, that was pretty epic. And there were so many tastings, too many tastings in fact, but we tried some of the most finest gelato ever. And one of the finalists were actually Bondi, who run the gelato making class I mentioned earlier. So if you want to know about all the gelato flavours that you can try and the places that I really recommend going to try gelati in Italy, head on over to the episode show notes at untolditaly.com/157 for episode 157. And I promise you I've provided links and details of all our favourite gelato spots from Rome to Venice and beyond. Grazie mille. Thanks for your ongoing support of Untold Italy. We truly appreciate all of you, and especially our Amici private podcast members, and of course, all our subscribers and listeners joining us from all around the world. If you do have a spare moment, we would so appreciate it if you left us a 5-star rating and review on your favourite podcast app. That way, we can reach more Italy-loving travellers just like you. That's all for today. Next week, we're heading back to Tuscany to experience life and the gorgeous countryside there slowly. But until then, it's ciao for now.
The Untold Italy podcast is an independent production. Podcast editing, audio production and website development by Mark Hatter, production assistance and content writing by the other Katy Clarke. Yes, there are two of us. For more information about Untold Italy, please visit untolditaly.com.